you? I'm tired.
Yeah, me too.
You don't look tired.
Thank you. You don't look tired either.
I think I do.
Not from here, not from all the way over here, you don't.
What's the right face for not looking tired? Are you supposed to look up or down?
Never down.
Never
Light.
down.
It's the light, it's not the angle.
Oh, I see.
Oh, beautiful.
Come on,
Yeah,
honey.
yes.
Okay. So here's what I thought we would do.
Okay.
First of all, are you as prepared as I am? Yeah, we're not officially sponsored by Starbucks, but I feel like it's going to happen at some point.
It better happen.
Yeah, I feel like it should. They've got new cups. They've got new thingamahooches that hold the whatever. Okay, so here's what I thought we would do.
Okay.
Let's cheers.
Cheers. 8 days to go.
That's right. Bing. Okay. So, here was my thought about this whole documentary thing.
Yeah.
And so if we look at this as kind of day one, even though it's definitely not day one. And why are you moving everywhere?
I'm sorry. I'm trying because... Hey, step off, woman. I'm trying to get the
People
light
are going
right.
to barf. Okay. We can't have people throwing up.
I know. And we don't want to go all Blair Witch on them. Okay, I get it.
Blair Witch. Right. I didn't even watch that. Let's not get into that.
Okay, we good?
We digress.
Is that
You're
stable?
Fantastic. You're stable. I'm stable. Basically.
Okay.
So here's what I was thinking. So, we've talked about a lot of stuff. I thought today we would talk about, so to sort of introduce this whole thing. Okay, let me back up. So my idea for doing this was because I think that too often people see the final product of something and they have no idea either A, how it got there, or B, how much pain was involved. And they think everyone has this easy street, even people like you who had this beautiful day when everything went viral and Oprah called and blah, blah, blah happened. So what I was thinking was, because we're in sort of the infant stage of this project, but we're going to do this fast, it would be a great way to document our own little, not a reality show, unless you want to get Kanye on the phone. I'll get Adam Levine, of course, and maybe if you could stage some sort of a chaotic event at the grocery store and some drama, but just to let people know what really goes into this, pull back the curtain a little bit, because I think that people like Liz Gilbert and Brene Brown and Marie Forleo, and those are on the female side, but on the male side, like David Siteman Garland and Gary Vaynerchuk and Ryan Levesque and all these people have opened up this beautiful world where they're totally willing to say, yeah, this is effing hard. No matter what you go into, whether you're writing a book, whether you're starting a company, whether you have a family, you don't have a family, whatever it is, it's hard. And there's failure, if you want to call it that, or whatever. So I was like, let's just put it all out there and show people all the stuff that we wrestle with while we're trying to get this book to market, so that they don't see it just at the end. They can kind of see beginning to end what we deal with.
Right.
So what I thought we would talk about first was my big question that I asked you, and I think that the answer has even changed a little bit for you over the last several weeks, which is, people are always asking, okay, how do I write the book? How do I publish the book? How do I market the book? How do I make $1 million off my book? How do I get bestseller status? How do I do all these things? And the first thing I ask people, and it's because I didn't know this for myself when I started and realized how critical it was on the other side, what is your why? So you have to understand your own personal why, and it's a similar philosophy to understanding your own definition of success for any business venture, anything that you go into. Why are you doing it? What's your ultimate goal? Because if you don't know that for yourself, you are always going to fall prey to the goals that other people set for you and other people's definition of success. And then you'll start to feel like, oh, I wasn't successful because I didn't sell 50,000 books. When maybe in the end, your goal was to sell one book.
Right.
So what's your why?
Well, you know what? It's so hard because in the beginning, I just wrote because I didn't know how to not write.
Yeah.
Right? And it was just, I think it's such an interesting time in history to make art. I can't hear you now. No!
Get me back.
There, I think I have you back now.
Hi.
There, okay. Yeah, it's this super interesting time in history to make art because
Yeah.
it's so accessible.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to reach out and to share and it's a super strange time to make art as well because
Mm-hmm.
there's no rules to follow anymore.
Right.
It's not standard the same way it used to be. But when I only wrote because I needed to. Because I needed to make sense of life, of whatever was happening, I just needed to make sense of it, and that was the best way for me to do it. I describe in the book at one point in time that I felt like the more that I poured out onto paper, the more God poured in.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how to explain it any other way until it started to get shared with other people. Right? And then the more we poured out to each other, the more this other stuff poured in between. And I feel like now it's one of those things where life is hard.
Really?
Life is
Are
hard
you sure?
and life is scary and life is something that's really difficult to articulate sometimes because we don't always understand what we're doing or why we're doing it or what's happening. And I feel like I write to try to make sense of that.
Right.
And if I can make sense of it for anybody else, then that means something.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, for sure. I mean, here's the thing. You're like, is that right? And here's the thing is, there's no right answer. You know what I mean? It's like, and you've brought up a really, really interesting point that I hadn't thought about. A lot of times people will just start with, I want to write a book. And that's, of course, how you and I met because you wrote this post and it went viral. And there was, beyond the fact that it was just an overall brilliantly written post, there was this one line that caught my attention personally. The whole blog post caught my attention personally, but there was a line that caught my attention professionally, which was when you said, I've always wanted to write a book, and I'm not quoting verbatim here, so I've always wanted to write a book, but I was afraid no one would want to read it, basically.
Right.
And that just struck me because I think you're one of millions and millions and millions of people who feel that way. So some people feel like, I want to write a book because I just want to write a book. And then they get that feedback from others that says, well, was it successful? Did you write a bestseller? Blah, blah, blah. How much money did you make? On and on and on. And so for you, what you're addressing here that I think is very interesting is that you've always been a writer, right? And like, if you think about Liz Gilbert before Eat, Pray, Love, I mean, she had, 8, 9 books that were published before Eat, Pray, Love. And people act as though Eat, Pray, Love was the first thing to ever hit the market. They don't even realize that not only had she been published previously, but it was completely different genre from the memoir type thing. And so her why has probably morphed over time as well. But when we started talking about putting together your book and when you started really thinking about seriously putting together a book, what was your why then?
I think, and it's hard. It's hard when you think about how much has changed over the last 6 months and how much it changes everything that happens. At the time, I wanted to write it just because I wanted to remember. I wanted my kids to remember. I wanted there to be some evidence of having come out on the other side.
Yeah.
And it was honestly, in the beginning, it was just more like, this is my life, and it's not overly interesting, and it's not overly unique, but the way I managed my way through it may be different. And I wanted to remember that, and I felt like I was coming out on the other side, and I was starting to see it more as a resilience, as a story versus just a struggle that I was in the middle of.
Mm-hmm.
And I was starting to appreciate it that way. And so I just wanted to write it down.
Yeah.
I just wanted to write it down. And a big part of it, too, is because my mother's adopted. Mm-hmm. And I have no knowledge of my family history on her side at all. We don't have stories to pass down from her side. We don't have anything. I've never met my maternal grandparents. I know her sister, but I've never met her brothers. And I wanted there to be something to pass down. As boring and mundane as it may have been, it was still something that we could begin to build as a family.
Right.
And then all this happened.
Yeah.
And then it became one of those things of, I'm not the only person. As mundane as it sounds, I'm not the only person that feels this way or struggles through these things. And it became
surprised? Like, were you really
surprised?
Yeah.
Really surprised. When you get 750 Facebook messages that say, oh my goodness, I feel it the exact same way.
Right. But here's the crazy thing about that, is that you've been writing blogs for how long? 10, 11 years?
Yeah.
So I understand that Facebook is relatively new to the scene, but this wasn't your first. This one just, I mean, for whatever reason, this one took hold of people's hearts. But then people started going back and reading, and they're just identifying with you, Right.
Throughout. And the irony of that is that when I posted it, genuinely, from the depths of my soul, I don't think it's one of the better things I've written.
Huh. And that's interesting. Because, of course, I watch you. I hope this is okay to say, but, I mean, now you wrestle, right? Because you didn't know then that anybody beyond your normal, I mean, how many people did you have reading? I don't even know if you were tracking, but like on average, how many likes would you get on a Facebook? Because you do something unique where you basically blog on Facebook, which a lot of people are starting to do now. They'll write a whole blog post on Facebook and then also have it on their blog, but you didn't put part of it and then link to your blog. It's all there, which I think is pretty brilliant actually. But how many average likes were you getting before this craziness?
You know what? It kind of it built up over my photography business, right? Because then I would do photographs and I would write stories about the couples I was photographing. So the readership kind of built up that way. But when it started, I had like 600 Facebook friends.
Yeah.
So I don't know, on average 50.
Yeah.
On a good day,
right?
On a good day, and now. Some of them will be shared like 300, 400, 500 times on average, So it's a giant leap. And for some reason, this one, I'm sure part of it is algorithm, the timing that it went out on Facebook, whatever it is, somehow it connected with people, even though I didn't consider it an overly great piece of writing. Mm-hmm. It's what people gravitated to. And then it went, right? And then suddenly it became about the fact that these struggles that we live, these stories we go through, these challenges, they're not for nothing.
Right.
Right? And if there's any way that we can even remotely be like, you know what, I hear you, I see you, you're not the only person going through this, then that means something, and that's significant. And given that we live in a day and age when we can reach out that way, it seems crazy not to. It's a risk still, but it's still like the best time in history to do that.
Well, what's so interesting to me from the business side of it, right, is that we as business people, any entrepreneurs out there spend a ridiculous amount of time analyzing the right time, the right day, the right social media platform, the right sort of formula for their blog. What's a controversial topic right now? What is a heart-tugging? They're trying to strategically get their message out. And if you had known that this was going to blow up like this, I get the sense from the conversations that we've had that you might have thought twice about
maybe it's hard to say,
sure.
And so it depends on the day, depends on when you ask kind of thing, right? It's a constant navigating an immense amount of vulnerability with the immense amount of criticism that comes with it.
Exactly. And
so, I mean, really, writing the book should be the easy part, right? Because you're already out there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just, I don't know. And I still struggle sometimes with the why, right? Because the why is part of it is very selfish because I just want to do it. Just because I have put so many years into writing these little pieces, I just want to have it that I can hold in my hand.
Right.
I'm tactile. I love books. I just want to be able to have a book in my hand. And the other part of it is completely unselfish in the sense that I had no idea that many people felt that way and that many people could relate and that many people just want to hear that story. Tell me that you made it to the other side. You know, whether it's going through a broken heart for the first time, or whether it's feeling lost or insecure or having falling outs with friends. We have all been there at some point in time or another. And people just want to know, A, that they're not alone, and B, that we can get through it somehow, that we're going to be still standing at the end of the day.
So let's, if we can, let's talk about what I think has been one of the biggest challenges. It becomes one of the biggest challenges for anyone who's putting themselves out there in a vulnerable way. So obviously writing is an incredibly vulnerable art, especially when you're writing about your own life and your own feelings and your emotions and things like that. But even if you are creating a product line or anytime you're putting yourself out there, there's a deep personal connection to whatever it is you are trying to sell, because you kind of see it as an extension of yourself. And so if people are critical of it, it's easy for us to take that criticism so personally. So one of the things that I think people are not prepared for, I mean, I'm in this boat as well, not to the degree that, you are at this point, but you get so many people who are like, I love this post. I identify with you. Thank you so much. You've touched my heart. I'm so glad I found you, blah, 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 blah. And then you get the one asshole. I mean, let's just call a spade, right?
Yep.
And you'll get, the one person who criticizes your book, or, I mean, I've certainly had that, criticizes your product, criticizes the t-shirt you're wearing is totally the wrong color for you. I mean, who knows what, right? But we will spend a day being so bummed about that one person, and when in our head, what makes the most logical sense is to focus on the people who we are benefiting, this community that we're creating of like-minded, women predominantly, but just people who are just supporting one another through life.
Yeah, for sure.
And people are just not prepared.
No.
For that criticism.
I really wasn't.
Well, I wasn't. And again, I can count on two hands because I just haven't had the level of exposure with the writing per se. But, I mean, it takes me down every time.
Yeah, I think it's, I'd like to give humanity the benefit of the doubt. And I think that for the most part, when it's something truly vulnerable, people are a bit more receptive. There's more grace there. They're a little bit more delicate with the people's feelings versus just a product.
Yes, right.
But I think why it hurts so much is because when you're doing it, you're actually talking about those insecurities. You're actually sitting there showing the cracks in your armor, saying, this is what I feel crappy about.
Yeah.
And so it makes it super easy for someone just to poke at that one.
Just pour salt right in it. Yeah.
Yeah, and just because you can put it out there doesn't mean that having somebody attack it doesn't hurt, kind of thing. For some reason, I think people get the impression that, oh, you're able to put yourself out there, therefore you're unbreakable.
Right.
When really that's not what it is at all. And it totally stings. And I think for me, when people do it, it creates that doubt inside of me. Mm-hmm. Right? What if they're
Or it brings that doubt to the surface, because the doubt's there.
Yeah, right? For sure. And I don't know why. I don't know why that one person can overshadow the 100 other people.
Right.
I think that's also why we have to be very careful with what we say to people, because it can bring them down. But, Brene Brown wrote this fantastic thing in her book, right? About if you're not in it, if you're not one of those people who's standing bare in the middle of all of this, then you don't get a say.
Exactly. And you and I have talked about that, because I remember when you and I first connected, there was someone who kind of came at me and was suggesting that I was being very opportunistic.
Right.
And it broke me, because I don't consider myself an opportunistic person at all. I mean, the reality of the situation, Jen, is I could go out and invest thousands of dollars in the publishing of your book, and it could go nowhere. That's not going to happen, by the way. Don't panic. But you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not, people assume that just because you've created this platform, if you build it, they will come. That is not the case. And that's one of the reasons that we're documenting this whole thing, because the marketing and the sales end of this, I think people are going to be very intrigued by how much still has to go into it. And if you just pay attention to any artist today, specifically music industry, they have to work so incredibly hard to consistently stay relevant. You don't just get a number one and then all of a sudden, I mean, unless you're Adele, apparently you can go away for 3 years and come back, and it's like, but that's the anomaly. That's not the norm at all. So everyone, I got one or two people who were just like, that's great. Like, you act like you're a very giving person, but in reality, you're opportunistic. And it's like, no, I just saw this beautiful voice that I wanted to do anything I could, to help come out into the world. And my friend Karen had said to me, if they're not in your inner circle, they don't get a vote. They don't get a vote. And so I remember I texted you and I was like, draw a circle and put the people, put the people's names on the outside of the circle who have a say. Because those are the people who love you and respect you and have your best interest at heart and will tell you if you're going off, the straight and narrow.
Right. Well, and I think it's human nature to want to feel understood.
Yeah.
Right? It's a deep desire to feel like that's not who I am. And especially when people attack your character.
Yes.
It's different when someone attacks your opinion about politics, about whatever. But when they attack your character, the very essence of who you are and what you value.
Yeah.
And I have to remind myself all the time that people don't know us.
Right.
The way they think they know us.
They do. Mm-hmm.
Right? So people would read the story about how you and I connected and about the project that they're working on. And all the while, they don't know that I talked to 4 other publishers at the same time.
Correct. And they don't know that I, we debriefed after all of them. And I was like, if that's where...
Well, and it was a choice that I made.
Correct. Yeah.
Right? They just see it as you wheeled in this girl who needed help, and that's not at all what happened. They weren't privy to the conversations that we had, the emails.
I don't wheel anybody. I'm not.
It's just, but that's what we want, right? We want people to recognize who we are even more
than wheel people in
than what we do. Oh, baby, you wheel me in every day.
Do I?
Banter.
I wheel some people. Like, I'm sitting here and I'm like, man, who do I want to wheel? If I really can wheel people, I got a list. I have a list. Okay.
But that's what people think, right? People hear pieces of the story, and based on their own experience, based on their own perception, based on where they are in life, they draw conclusions from that. And it's hard, and it sucks sometimes. And that's why that inner circle matters.
But you know what else, too? I think that people fill in the gaps with information that justifies why they can't take action.
Yeah, so maybe.
I sense sometimes is not the case. Nothing is the case across the board. Let me make sure I've said that, because I always and never I try to stay really far away from. But I think in many cases, make 1 million people have all had the idea for example, in my younger years, and I'm pretty young, but in my younger years, I swear I invented the warming ice scraper. The one that the Sharper Image ultimately came out with. I swear I invented it. Like, I came up with the idea, and then they made it really happen. I think there are probably thousands of people who all have the same idea. But there are only going to be one or two or three who actually take that idea and say, I can do it. I'm going to go do it. Not only do I have the idea, but I can go do it. It's so much easier to say, oh my gosh, I have this great idea, but I can't do it because, and now we list it all out. So I think lots of times when people go out and they tear other people down or they fill in the holes of the story with something, it's because they're looking for a way to justify, well, that couldn't have been me, and here's why. Fill in the blank. Because it gives them an easy out.
My husband and I had this conversation recently because you'll get a lot of people who will say, oh, well, I could have done that. Or I could have painted this, or I could have sold this. The point is that you didn't.
Yeah.
And even when I was doing photography, I would get a lot of students coming out of school and being like, walk me through a photography business, walk me through how to do this and how to do that. And I would always tell them that, sure, having skills matters. But there are hundreds of photographers just right here in the city better than I am. I think the difference is those who follow through and those who don't. Mm-hmm. Because you could be the best photographer, the best writer, the best anything. If nobody knows about you because you're not doing it, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And follow through in anything in life matters.
You have to be able to execute, and you have to be willing to execute consistently, even when doing so doesn't bring about the desired result on the day that you expect or hope. I mean, I'm the most impatient person on earth. Like, literally. I'm pretty sure that I could win an award for the most impatient person on earth. But you just have to keep going. You just have to keep trying new things and doing new things until... I mean, what would have happened if the day before you posted the now infamous post, you had thought, I'm sick of doing this because it's just no one's paying attention.
Well, and that's the thing though, right? Is that I think there's and this this matters to me a lot because I feel the need to reiterate that when it happened, that was never the goal.
Right.
Right? And that's what a lot of people don't understand. A lot of people, I'll get emails being like, okay, how do I get a blog that I can get all these followers? And I was like, but that was never what I meant to do.
Yeah.
It was never about the other side.
Yeah.
And that comes across as strange to people because often people are like, well, what's the point of writing if you didn't want it to be read? And I was like, well, it's not that I didn't want it to be read. It's just that it didn't matter to me if it were 6 people or 6,000 people.
But that right there is where you come back to the why of why you do something, why anyone does something. So for you, for so long, and even today, it's because you love to write. Now, for some people, they write blogs specifically to generate traffic. And they need to know that that's why they're doing it, because that is their end goal. That's not bad. It's content creation.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
Everyone kind of has a different, end goal in mind. But I think that people in your position, it's like the other analogy, we talk about Liz Gilbert a lot, you and I. And the other one I talk about a lot is Angry Birds. Because Angry Birds was that company's 51st app. And you can't create 50 apps that don't do anywhere near as well as the one that they become known for if you don't love to create apps.
Right.
You quit after the third quote-unquote failure, right?
Right.
So, but sort of what happens, Angry Birds is a product. I don't know how emotionally connected they are to Angry Birds.
Right.
But
yeah.
When it's something like, I remember I went to see Liz Gilbert speak in Mesa years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. And she said that after Eat, Pray, Love came out, she was terrified to write something else. Or at least terrified to release it. And I think she threw an entire manuscript, let's all not quote me on this, but in the trash at one point because she thought everyone, was wanting Eat, Pray, Love again. I can never beat Eat, Pray, Love. I just...
Oh, yes, I can so relate to that. So relate to it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like...
What do you do when the best thing you've written is already out there?
Well, and what's funny about, and ironic, right, is that similarly, she Eat, Pray, Love for her was such a cathartic manuscript to write. She didn't write that with consumerism in mind or the public in mind. But then, lo and behold, all these women identify. And just with her feelings, and of course she got totally taken down because people said, well, good for you. You don't have children. You can go off to an ashram in India. I can't do that. It's like you're missing the point entirely. But
yeah.
She was really nervous about putting something else out there. And so I think when you're sort of thrust into that spotlight, you were, I think Brene Brown was, it's like you don't have time to mentally and emotionally set your foundation of, you're like riding the wave and it's changing at the same time and you're just trying to stay standing, right?
Absolutely. Donald Miller, the author of Blue Like Jazz, wrote an amazing blog post recently that talked about the year after Blue Like Jazz came out, which they ultimately turned into a movie, and Blue Like Jazz was a huge seller. And like Liz Gilbert, he wasn't a very well-known writer at the time, and then this book came out, and he talked about the confusion and the depression that came after writing it because he didn't know what to do anymore. I think I got the impression, I don't want to obviously speak on his behalf, but I got the impression that he started to get confused about the why. When suddenly there was a huge readership, and suddenly you're like, is it for somebody else that I'm writing? And you have to kind of come back to it over and over and over again. And even now, when I post things on Facebook, when I continue to write things, it's a lot of times now it isn't for me as much as it's for the community that we collectively built.
Right.
Right now there's this group of people that I can post something and then they share their experiences. And within all of those stories, other people connect with each other. It's not even about connecting with me as much as it's about connecting through something that somebody else is going through at the same time.
Yeah.
And there was definitely times when I've been like, can I post this? Is this what people want to hear, not hear? And I have to constantly re-anchor myself and say, what is it about? And you asked me one of the best questions was, how do you want all of this to look? Like, how do you want life to look? Not just a book or not just writing, but how do you want it all to look? And another friend asked me a question. She's like, hypothetically, say the best thing you've ever written is out there. Then what? And I think that's such an important question. Then what?
Then what?
Let's remove all expectations. And what are you left with?
Yeah.
Would you still go ahead and write? Would you still go ahead and publish a book? And the answer for me is yes.
Right.
If everything went back to the same way it was on September 29th, 2015, I would still be writing and I would still want to write a book.
Yeah.
So let's do it, right? That's what it comes down to. But I have to remind myself, I almost have to pin it on a board and be like, this life that you had before everything happened, that's the center, that's the anchor, and and it changes and you navigate and, you have a readership that is really a community now. Like, it's not just about reading, it's about taking part in each other's lives and each other's experiences. And I like to think that we sort of mediate that to agree, we initiate it, but it always comes down to the why, the then what.
Right.
Like, if the book completely fails, then what? You made a book. That's what happens.
Yeah.
If the book fails, you made a book. You put a book out into the world.
Well, and I don't even believe in failure. I don't like that word. I don't like the concept because I really believe that all it is the universe kind of grabbing you by the ponytail and whipping you in a different direction. It's just... It's like the saying that God whispers and then he speaks a little more loudly and then he screams, Failure is the universe, God, a higher power, however you want to look at it. Just, saying you're trying to play pin the tail on the donkey and you're facing east and the donkey's west. So for God's sake, turn the hell around and go that way, Because if you look at, quote, failure in the right way, or in a positive way, you can learn anything from it, which makes it not a failure. It makes it a learning experience.
Right.
You know, but I think that what you just said about, because what I was going to ask you was what you kind of said two. I was going to ask you what your top three strategies are right now for dealing with kind of staying present in who you are as you navigate all of this. Because what's scary is the idea of following your dream or your passion, whatever it is, and having the outcome change you in a not positive way, or having your happiness be dependent upon a specific outcome, right? So you've mentioned continuing to kind of hone the reasons for your why. What's your why? And talking about, thinking about, so what then? Then what? And I think, like, what's the worst thing that can happen is a great way. Sometimes if you look fear in the face, it's not as scary.
Yeah, I think it's also, and I think, honestly, I think that's something that is truly one day to the next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? Like, some days I'm just going to wake up and I'm going to feel more sensitive and more raw and more, like, challenged about things. And other days I feel better about it. And I think it's part of constantly learning and constantly growing. And I think it's naive to say that our happiness doesn't change and waver on the results of our work, right?
Sure.
I think we would all like to say, oh, it doesn't matter, no matter what. Nobody can read my book and everyone can give me 1 star on Amazon and I'm not going to care.
Right.
It's going to hit a nerve no matter what. And you're going to grieve that, I think. And I think that's part of the human experience. You're putting yourself out there. You're creating something. You're hoping for a reception to some degree. And it's more whether or not can you pick yourself up after that didn't go quite as planned and carry on versus just completely shutting down from it. Because I think if we're so far removed from the result and how people feel about it, it also changes the way that you produce art in the first place.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it's just being conscious of...
Yes, being aware, knowing.
Aware. So, there's this funny meme that goes around about being an entrepreneur, and it's kind of like, looks like a mountain range, right? And it's the daily life cycle of an entrepreneur, and you wake up kind of saying, oh my gosh, best day ever. And by 10 o'clock, you're like, oh my gosh, I've created this great thing. And by noon, you think this absolutely sucks. And by 2 o'clock, I'm a rock star. I'm killing it. And by 4 o'clock, you're like, I quit. I'm going back to my, a 9 to 5. And with writing, I mean, you and I have gone through the same thing where I'll get a text from you on Monday that's like, I've got this. I feel so great. It's coming together. Everything's great. And then Tuesday morning, you're like, I don't know if I can do this. I just really don't know.
Absolutely. I was just thinking that. Our thread of text, even over a given day.
Yeah.
Has been like, I'm freaking out, I'm panicking, this is never going to happen. Right. 2 hours later, oh man, I so got this. Like, boss, we are down.
And it's so funny because I've learned, at the beginning, I was like, no, everything is fine, everything's going to be fine. And I've learned, okay, give her 2 hours. In 2 hours, she's going to be completely fine. Sometimes you just have to allow yourself to have those moments. I have whole days where I just think, I got nothing today.
Yeah, for sure. And, and I've learned that it's similar to parenting.
Right?
That's what I can relate to it the most. When you have your first child, you don't know that those sleepless nights are ever going to pass because you've never been through it before. Right? And I think when you are creating something, especially if you're doing it for the first time, it's one of those super vital reasons why you should have someone in your life, why you should have a Liz Lyons in your life who has been through it. Because I don't know that this is part of the journey because I've never done it before. Well, I don't know that it's supposed to be frustrating and it's supposed to be discouraging at times and that it's going to come in waves because I've never done it, whereas you have. And you know that there's something that comes out of the other side and that if you're not struggling through it, you're probably not doing it right.
Well, that's true. But, the other thing, I would love you so much for saying, that you need a Liz Lyons. I think people get scared when they have a Liz Lyons in their life. But The other thing you need besides a Liz Lyons is Liz Lyons needs a Liz. You know what I mean? Like I have to have.
We all do, yeah.
Because I've only done it my way. I mean, I've done 3 books, but I've done them my way, and so I'm constantly seeking advice and guidance and new strategies and new thought, new ways of thinking and all that from other people who have done it differently, people who have done it better, people, things change all the time. And so if any of us ever thinks we know everything about anything, I'm concerned.
Right. Well, and I think that applies to just about anything.
Everything.
Right? But I think one of the things that keeps me somewhat anchored in the ground is constantly trying to release expectation. All the time. And it's such a hard thing to do. Yeah. But constantly just reminding myself that if we're going to do it, if you're going to throw yourself off a ledge and take a giant leap of faith, do it your way.
Yeah.
Right? Be you when you're doing it. If this doesn't feel entirely comfortable, then don't do it that way. And that's the beauty of making art right now, is that you can do it your way and you can put everything that is you into it and put it out into the world, and that's an incredible thing. But you have to free those expectations as well, right? Like, let go of the expectation that every manuscript has to be 80,000 words or it's not good.
We just talked about this yesterday.
I know, right? Exactly. Well, that's exactly what I mean, is having to free yourself of the shoulds. And it's not just in creating art. It's in parenting. It's in relationships. It's in anything.
Thou shalt not should on thyself.
You need to make a card with that.
I made a necklace with it at some point. I probably should make a card. I mean, there's a should. There's an appropriate use of should. But like when you were talking about doing it your own way, jumping your own way, it made me think, have you ever watched a bunch of kids, like young kids at a swimming pool, all jump off the diving board? And you just basically, it's like do whatever you want, right? And one little kid will just jump off. And the next person will potentially watch the kid who came before and just kind of do what they did. And then you've got the one kid who will go and just do a cannonball and flip around and do something crazy. And that's the kid who always catches my attention. Not that they don't all catch I'm not saying that one kid is better than another. Let's not all attack Liz now. But
send
I'm just saying,
email to Liz.
Yeah, right. No one email me. But that's what, like, for example, we were having this discussion about the homeless situation and the people who are in the middle of the street, with their signs, right? Asking for money, asking for anything, whatever. And I had written a post several weeks ago because my daughter and I were driving home from somewhere and we came to an exit and there was a man and he was sitting there and he had his shopping cart and he wasn't holding his cardboard sign. It was affixed to the shopping cart because he was hand carving a new sign for himself out of wood.
I remember reading that.
And I was like, oh my gosh, like everyone else is just kind of, okay, what do we have to do? What's the approach? What's the standard common approach to the business of being homeless? Which in some case, I don't want to call it the business. I don't want it to sound, that did not sound right. But the point of the matter is that in Phoenix, I believe at this point, you actually have to have a license to stand in the middle of the street. So it has become a bit of a business because we've seen tons of stories about individuals who do it because they can actually make more money doing that than working at McDonald's. But nevertheless, there's a common sort of approach where you hold your sign and you just hang out and wait. But here's this individual who's doing it totally differently for whatever reason. And it's really attention getting. From me anyway, in a great way. I was like, wow, this is different.
Well, and I think it reminds me of when I went back and I started my photography business. I had never been an entrepreneur before. I had never really done photography before. And one of the first things I did was look up other photographers.
Yeah.
And I wanted to see how they were doing it, what works, what doesn't. But it's really easy to get caught up in that.
Yeah.
It's really easy to get caught up in this is how it's supposed to be done.
Correct.
And it wasn't until a colleague of mine said, if you want to attract people who are like you, make your business like you.
Yeah.
And I think it applies to anything, right? When you put yourself out there as yourself, you're going to attract like-minded people.
Yeah.
Don't make your website pink if you don't like
don't
pink.
do it. There's no if. Just don't do it. Just don't make your website pink and you'll be fine.
But my very first one was.
It was.
Because I thought I wanted to attract brides. I wanted to, and I thought that's what brides wanted. And then I stopped to be like, I don't want brides. I want people who want to hire me.
Yeah.
Who happen to be getting married or, wanting pictures of their families and stuff like that. And it completely changed the way that I did business, and it completely changed my clientele. And I have to remind myself that daily when I post stuff. Because I'm like, ooh, maybe I'm going to post this and someone doesn't like it. And then your voice comes in my head and said, that's okay. Those aren't the people then that we want. People.
Yeah. Because here's the thing, and this is something I believe with all of my heart. When you create something, I don't care what it is, and you're doing it from the mindset of what will people like? Not who am I, what's my unique voice, how do I want to put it out there, but what will people like? I'm going to do it that way. Here's what happens. They ultimately, if you get usually when you're doing it that way, it's because you want a certain level of success. You're looking to appeal to the masses.
Right.
If you attain that level of success, the masses come see you and they don't recognize you.
Right.
You are not what they expect because you have put on a mask. And you have written like someone else, you have spoken like someone else, you've created a website that looks like someone else. They see you and it's like, and one of the best examples I can think of that is Nicole Curtis. Because, she has her show on HGTV, she does her own thing, she's completely who she is. And I remember the first time I met her, I completely fell in love with her on TV. Like how she behaved, how she acted, how she handled her business.
Right.
And I remember the first time I met her, I thought, I wonder, if she's not like that, it's going to be very jarring. She's exactly like that.
Right.
So it felt like I had known her forever because I had been watching her for years. And so, she's exactly like that. But sometimes you meet people and you think, and I think now, especially with social media, people are so much more free to be who they are because they aren't being guided by publicists and managers and agents and everybody who's trying to create this thing, this entity. People are becoming known for who they are and being able to embrace who they are. And I think that's a great thing, but it comes with that vulnerable side where we have to put that out there and it's like, ugh.
And I think that's kind of the essence of the book we're making, right?
Yeah.
Is that I think we're kind of reaching a point where people are kind of over it.
Very over
it. People are sort of like, you know what, it takes a lot of work and energy to create a person that I'm not.
It's so much work to be who you're not.
And we're reaching a point where we're like, can we not just be who we are and have that be enough? And the answer to that is yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
The other answer to that is that it's not always the easiest thing to do.
Right.
And I guess that's kind of what the book's about, right? It's kind of about just how, and I don't ever want to go ahead and say that, yes, I'm totally there. And that every day I wake up and just, sound off positive affirmations to myself in the bathroom. Right. That's not what happens at all. Right. It's an everyday choice that sometimes doesn't get made. But
well, it's like, I remember when I went to see Liz Gilbert and somebody in the audience, everyone always asks her this, but, do you still meditate every day? And she said, I haven't meditated in 8 years, because people assume that, and it's like, no, it doesn't, no.
Yeah. Good. I'm happy to hear that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, maybe occasionally she does, but she just thought that was so funny because everyone thought, okay, so you've built this great meditation practice, so you're still meditating every day? As though, and to go back to something we were saying earlier, I almost feel as though some people ask that question because then they want to say, if she says, yes, I still get up every day at 4 a.m. and I meditate for an hour and a half, and then they'll go, well, I can't do that. So I can't be like you. I can't have the level of success, peace, joy, contentment, whatever. But we have to be willing to become comfortable. And it's not, like, to your point, it's an everyday, it takes effort every day to become comfortable and confident with it's like we were created to be, why would we want to be anybody else?
I think that's why this sort of thing, what we're doing right now, matters.
Yeah.
So that people can know, you know what, we sat here on the other end of the computer being like, I don't think I can do it.
Yeah.
That end product wasn't always every day of just a blissful locking myself up with my coffee and the words flowing out. Sometimes they were done in my bathroom in between scrubbing the tub, and sometimes I had to medicate myself to sleep because my brain wouldn't shut off. And sometimes I cried a lot because I felt discouraged and it was never going to happen. And I think it matters that people know that.
Well, and sometimes you'd
that's life.
That said, there's no way I can hit 80,000 words. And I would say, if you mention 80,000 words one more time, I'm going to
Right? Totally. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So what are we going to do? So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do this every week.
Okay.
We're going to do an episode a week, right?
Yep.
And we're just going to get through, we're going to brainstorm. Like, we're not going to make this, I mean, obviously there's going to be a lot of conversations we're going to have outside of this, but we're going to make these brainstorming and kind of through the whole process. So where are we at now? Let's just be very real about this. Like, where are we with what we need to discuss next week?
I feel like next week's going to be kind of a big deal.
Okay.
Like, next week.
I mean, we're pretty much done. You're almost done writing. I've started editing.
Well, that's what I mean. Like, next week, the chunk of writing.
The big chunk. So so should we put our pub date out there?
I think we should. Because people are asking all the time, right?
Well,
people
then go.
It's ridiculous how much. So I put an excerpt, a tiny little paragraph today up on Facebook. I don't know if you saw it because I was just like,
I just got out of the shower.
I cried my eyes out writing this whole thing, so I'm just putting it out here for all you beautiful people who have sent me emails every day being like, 10 days to go.
Yeah.
9 days to go.
Yeah.
I totally, I mean.
Okay, go. What is it?
Well, that's what we have to figure out. So.
Oh, we do not. We don't.
No. But I mean, so we have the 2 dates that we both like, right?
No, there's only one date.
Do you want to do the 30th or the 14th? Because
I want to do the 30th. Because
I get the reason why you like the 14th. I would lean towards it for the same reason.
Okay, so let's be clear. I liked the 14th because it's either a Tuesday or a Wednesday, which I happen to believe midweek is I believe that's the prime time to launch anything. Is a Tuesday.
Absolutely. Right. Yes.
However, we talked about the 30th, which happens to be what, a Friday?
Yes. Let me just pull up something right here. Yeah, so it's a Friday and the anniversary of having gone viral, which is kind of beautiful in its own way.
It's very beautiful, and we talked about how El Luna, who wrote The Crossroads Between Should and Must, which is a brilliant book, and anyone listening to this that's an appropriate use of should, get a copy of it because it's fantastic. But same thing happened to her where she wrote a post on Medium.com, it went viral, and then she released her book a day, on the same day, a year later, whatever. So I like symbolism.
Okay.
So we're going to break rules, and we're going to launch on a Friday.
Okay.
I don't care.
So I'm just looking at my schedule. So here's another reason, just to be technical, why I was hesitant about the 14th.
Okay.
And it's only because last year, our kids didn't actually start school till the 14th. That was their first day of school, if you can believe it.
I can.
They started super late because Labor Day was super late. I don't have a wedding the weekend of the 30th either to shoot, which I love. Yeah. So,
plus, to me, I look at it this way. I appreciate different industries, different social media platforms. You can look at all this data and try to do it perfect, but I don't care. I say, in the end, you always pick something that works for you. So the 30th works because it's symbolic. we're going to make Friday work because it's a week. Your kids will already be in school. It's a weekend for both of us. We can make that work. You have, your kids. I have my kids. Whatever. We're just going to make it. It's going to be great. So the 30th it is. Yes?
Yes, let's do it.
Cheers.
Yay, cheers.
Where's your Starbucks? You haven't drunk any of it.
I know, because it's almost gone.
Well, mine's almost gone too. It's freezing. So we're going to launch on the 30th. So what that means is that, we had a deadline for the big chunk of the manuscript to be done by the 30th of this month.
Yeah, which is next Saturday, and I will be getting drunk that night.
Okay, wonderful. I will start drinking that night. I might start drinking tonight. I don't know. I keep saying that. I've been saying it for like 20 years, since I've been 21, which has only been like 8 years. But anyway, so what we're going to do is, you're going to have the big chunk done by the 30th. I'm editing as you're going. So the way we've done this is we have a shared file so that I can edit as you go.
Yeah.
You can see what I'm editing. It just makes everything really consistent. And I will just put out there that one of the beauties in my mind of self-publishing is you want to find an editor that you can feel good about. However, in the end, it's all you. I mean, we will go to blows over whether there should be a comma somewhere. I promise you that. But if you just say, Liz, I want to say this phrase the way I want to say this phrase, I mean, it's your book.
Well, I think, though, as you say that, too, it's important, and I've had this conversation with some friends, that it's important to also choose someone who does see writing maybe a little bit differently, right? Because you're an editor, but you're also a reader.
Yeah.
And I think that matters, because my writing, I am so in it.
Yeah.
And we've had this conversation before, that the way that I write is just how I feel the world. I don't want it to sound arrogant. It's not a ton of work for me. So it's important to have somebody who is very outside of it, who doesn't write exactly the same way that I write, so that you can see it from a more objective reader perspective.
Well, I will tell you that that's one challenge I have editing your work, because I have two very different perspectives as a reader and as an editor. Because when I read your work, I mean, I have goosebumps like from head to toe. I don't want to change a thing. But then when I go in as the editor, I can see ways to make things maybe more concise, or to add a little detail here, or to, I'm a comma freak, so it's like you need a comma here, whatever. But I have to look at it in two very different ways, because as a reader, I just get so sucked in to it.
Yay!
Yay!
Well, and we'll figure it out.
Yep.
And we'll find that middle ground, and we will fine tune it.
So next week we're going to figure out where we are with the writing and the editing.
Yeah, next week we're going to be back here with a glass of wine.
Yeah. Let's
together.
do it not at 10 a.m. my time, so I can be justified in that. And
Perfect.
then we're going to start also, so while I'm in the editing, we're going to start talking through the actual publishing. So we've started to look into printers. We're starting to think distribution. You're in Canada. I'm in the States.
Yep.
There are all these kind of different things that I've certainly not done before, but we're just going to figure them out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I've been in touch with one girl about covers as well.
Yeah. Good, because I just remembered that I forgot to contact the other person.
But I'll tell you about. She's already gotten back to me and stuff too, and she's in the States, I think.
Okay.
I should look it up. I don't know. On Facebook, everybody's in your living room, so
right.
I never even think about that stuff. But yeah, anyways, I want to talk to you about that, and tell me what you think of her, and we'll start plucking away at all the details.
Yippee!
Yay! I think it's worth mentioning too that from like a business perspective, one of the best pieces of advice I ever got was kind of in line with what we were talking about earlier, was that if you're going to write a book, you have to be able to separate yourself enough from it to make it something marketable.
If that's your why, yes.
Well, but that's where hybrid and self-publishing comes in as a nice alternative, is that you can still distribute and market it your way with if you can't detach from it quite the same way, right? If you can't just write it and let it go.
Well, to be honest, if you're with a traditional publisher, on some levels, you better be able to just write it and let it go.
You have to let it go,
and on other levels, you better be ready to write it and then let it go and then own it again. Because from a marketing side, people do not appreciate. We should do a whole podcast on this too.
Yes.
In fact, I told you I was going to interview Jenna McCarthy about the traditional side because she's done like 14 books and she's brilliant and I love her to death and she's as honest as the day is long. But what really goes on, there's nothing wrong with traditional publishing. I'm not even saying I wouldn't do it someday. It's just important to be aware of all the different facets and how they work in traditional publishing versus self or hybrid, because people aren't aware that they've still got to do their own marketing big time and have no control over edits or cover design.
Yes.
So, things to talk about.
All right, kid, I'll see you next week.
Okay, I love ya.
Love you too.
Okay,
bye.